Welcome everyone to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis. I am the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software. And in today's session, we're going to be focusing heavily on Nexus Ally. In fact, we're kicking off a brand new series here, the Nexus Ally Admin Learning Series. And in this session, we're going to talk about how you can leverage Ally to configure it, to implement it, talk about some strategies, talk about what it does, talk about a number of things that just relate to Ally so we can set the stage for what's coming in some of the future sessions where we dig really deep into configuration. Now, of course, as always, this webinar is recorded, so you can come back to it. You can review it whenever you need to get a bit of a refresher on some of the core concepts and best practices we're going to talk about inside of here. Also, as always, for those of you who join us live in these webinars, we try to keep our eyes on that questions window. So if you have questions while we're going through the content today and you're here with us live, throw those questions in and we'll try to get those answered in line, or we also save a QA session, of course, for the end. Without further ado, let's jump right in and start talking a bit more about what we're going to be doing today. So again, I already recapped this a little bit, but we're going to be talking about the purpose of Ally within the Nexus ecosystem. We're going to try to help you understand much more about how Ally supports model consistency, because that's really the purpose of it. When a person is developing a Revit project model and they're assembling this project, there's certain best practices they should be doing. And it's difficult to stand over their shoulder all the time and guide them in the moment while they're creating models. Besides, these are professionals. They should know how things work. But every once in a while, we kind of practice things that aren't necessarily the best thing. And so we're going to talk about how we can configure Ally here for your firm, for what you want to sort of manage, and explore how you can roll this out across different project types, the whole company if you want to, targeting specific teams of people if you need to. And really the whole goal here is minimal disruption for the teams themselves. And so truly today, whether you're just getting started or whether you're kind of already experienced with most of Nexus and you want to start introducing Ally, well, the whole goal here is that we're going to set a foundation here for the Ally development, deployment, configuration, all of it. We're going to go through a few things. The core purposes and capabilities of Ally within Nexus. We're going to kind of identify, obviously, some of the organizational benefits of that real-time enforcement. You'll see an example of that right up front. And then we're going to learn how to kind of initiate that configuration. Where do you go to set this up? And then we're going to explore some different strategies you might use right out the gate here. So first, let me introduce Ally to you. And the way that I'm going to introduce this is I'm going to start just in a Revit project model. And we're going to try some things. We're going to do something, and then we're going to take a look at the effect of this as I do these things. So I'm going to go to a floor plan. It doesn't really matter which floor plan. I'm just going to use the main floor here for my example. And maybe I'm going to go in here and place a piece of text, right? This is simple. Just a piece of text, drop it in, and I'm going to type something. It doesn't really matter what I type here in this case. And there's no disruption. Right? I can go here, I can edit this text, I can take a look at its properties, I can click OK, nothing happens. This is perfect, right? But if a user goes in and takes a look at something and then decides to change a value that I have not approved to be changed, modifying anything about a text type here, when they click OK, still nothing happens, and that's intentional. I didn't want anything to happen in front of the user. I just want them, I just want to be aware that somebody's making modifications to text types. Now, you don't see that effect just yet. We'll see this in a minute here. But let's try the next thing where there's a bit more of a visual interaction. Let's try doing something that most of us don't really appreciate. I'm going to go import CAD directly into this project file and see what happens. Maybe I turned something off because that should have done something. That should have warned me that I was doing something I shouldn't be doing here. Give me a second. Let me actually restart my Revit because it looks like that one didn't do what I meant it to do. Give me a moment, y'all, while I refire up my Revit environment here. I might have turned it off inadvertently while I was prepping and didn't mean to do so. Give me just a second here. That's the power, the sad part about being an administrator, right? You can turn things off and you forget that you disabled something. In the meantime, let's go take a look while this is firing back up here. Let's go take a look at the effect of some of these things that have been happening. I'm going to pull forward my Internet Explorer browser here. Let me just get to the right page and pull this forward. And I'm already signed into the portal, but we're going to take a look here at the log information, the project logs that have been taking effect here. And in fact, these logs were doing what they were supposed to be doing. The text logging did work just a moment ago when I made that change to the text type. And it just says it's supposed to log the fact that I was doing a thing. And it did do the logging. You can see some previous things down here that I put in place, and we'll see those trigger here in just a moment as well. Let me get this open back up and re-overwrite my local copy and get this stuff to open. So in that little introduction, we'll come back to that in just a moment here, but let's step forward one step while my Revit is reopening, because you know how Revit is, it likes to be slow sometimes when you are presenting on a screen. So let's take a look at just accessing the core settings of this, and I'm going to step back to the actual introduction here in a moment. And in fact, I've kind of already begun a bit of that, where I went into the portal, which you can get to by going to ctcsoftware.com/portal if you want to, or you can just go to ctcsoftware.com and click the little person up here to sign in. And when you're authenticated, you're in the portal here. By default, it's going to drop you on the dashboard. That's the starting point where you can see things like some of our upcoming events, and you can also see some of the metrics and the data that's been logged here as well. To the right of that, up at the top, there is the standards button here. This affects quite a few things. It affects the development of your project standards, which is actually all the configuration for Ally. It affects family standard checks that you can use within the CMS. It shows you a little bit of logged information. But right here, the first area in standards is the project rule set. And so I have a little webinar sample rule set here that I've put together that's just for today, and it's the only thing that happens to be active. And you'll notice that it's targeting specific users in my firm. If I go click edit this for a moment, you'll notice that it's targeting me. So I'm the only person who is affected by these rules that have been configured. I think Revit's back open at this point. Let me try that little workflow once again so we can reintroduce a bit about that, what it's going to do here. So I'm going to go insert import CAD. This was the thing that didn't trigger a moment ago because I think I disabled it. There we go. This is going to tell me that importing CAD is strongly discouraged, and continuing is going to generate a message to the BIM management. So the user now has a choice. They can continue or they can cancel. And if they cancel, it will log that they chose to not do the thing, and it will stop the command. So it helps message in the moment that maybe this isn't the best choice. Or if maybe this is the appropriate choice and I need to do it anyway, I can choose to continue, which I've just chosen to do, and then it lets me step forward into the next stage, which is to choose a path here and go ahead and link that into my project. In this case, I'm bringing in some AutoCAD stuff. Another rule that I have set up here is if a person goes and tries to explode this in the project, say I try to do something like a partial explode or a full explode, either way, this pops up another message, a different message this time. We strongly discourage this. Now, this is all messaging that I have specifically put in, but we strongly discourage this. Please reconsider. If you continue, once again, a message will be sent to BIM management informing your decision. Now, in this case, they can't just click continue. They can cancel real easy, but they can't just click continue. And why is that? Because they have to type explode right here. So this is important. They have to specifically type something in. Explode, exclamation point. I'm telling them what the passphrase is. You don't have to do that, but you sure can. Now, if I click continue, it'll let me do the thing. But once again, it's going to log that I did that. Now, another thing that I personally really dislike, I don't want people to be doing things like in-place family modeling. So model in place right here. This is just another example of how I can potentially stop a harmful workflow. I don't appreciate this, especially like in my structural and MEP models, it's not ideal. I'd rather have a real piece of content that has real parameters that's able to be tracked. So model in place here, this one just says, this is not allowed on these projects. Like that's just the message. And when I click OK, it basically cancels them out and it does not let them do in-place modeling. So in some cases, I'm just logging some information about a choice they've made. In some cases, I'm messaging and saying maybe there's a better choice and then they can continue or cancel. In some cases, I'm making that messaging a little bit more intrusive where I'm making them type a passphrase to continue, so they actually have to have read the message instead of just clicking continue blindly. And in other cases, I'm stopping them completely from doing something. So these are all options that you have within the Ally toolkit. And so jumping back, taking a look at the Ally settings here, if I go back into the web browser, you can see here I've got this rule set that's targeting just me. So again, these 4 things that I've talked about so far, they are targeting me only while this is active. Now, in the rules themselves up here, if I'm in the add rules area, you can see those different individual things. I have a log set up for logging text type modifications. I have a warning for importing CAD. I have a warning and a passphrase for exploding CAD, and then I have a prevention here for in-place family modeling. So those 4 rules are configured within this space. Well, how do we start this? Like, how do we actually go through and configure this? Well, I started by building myself a rule set, and just like everything else within the CTC ecosystem, if you click the little plus sign up here, this will let you build a rule set, and you can decide what this rule set is going to do. So if I said something like, I don't know, maybe this is just organization rules, organization-wide rule set. I don't know, it's whatever you want to call it. And then you decide down here what the scope of this rule set is going to be. Who is this rule set targeting? Is it everybody who's signed into your company using a CTC software license authentication? If it's BIM suites, Nexus, doesn't matter, whatever that is. If they're in your organization, they are affected by these rules. Is this going to target a discrete project? Not Revit project model, but a defined project. We've talked in the PAL series about configuring projects and mapping Revit project models to a discrete project. And so you can use those projects for more than just analytics. Here, we're using those same project definitions for the purpose of pushing rules. So if I work for a certain client, my client, maybe it's XYZ food distribution or something, it doesn't matter, whoever it is. If I have a project for them, I could affect their projects with specific rules. Maybe they have certain BIM standards in our agreement, in our contract, that says I have to do certain things or can't do certain things or must assemble a model a certain way. I can target that project with specific rules. So anytime a user on my team is working on that project, it is affected by those rules, and I can help guarantee that the project is built in a healthy way that aligns with the customer's standards. I can also, as you saw today, target a specific user in the system, so I can focus rules on some specific person. Typically, I don't do this, but you absolutely can. You can also target a group of users. So maybe you have an architecture team and a structure team and an HVAC team and electrical team, right? And you want those models to be affected by different kinds of rules, right? I don't really care if the architecture team maybe builds in-place families, but I absolutely do not want my structural team and my MEP teams building in-place families. And so I could target a specific group of users and say, I don't care what project you're working on, but you specifically, as you're a part of this team, you're not allowed to do this thing. And so, or maybe I want to advise you to not do a thing, or I want to log that you're doing a thing for a specific group of people. And so you have that ability, and this piggybacks on users and groups up here within the CTC portal. So all of this ties in with the rest of the CTC portal and Nexus ecosystem up here. Let's go through and build the most simplistic and highest level set of rules here at the organization level. So this is, like I said, organization-wide rule set. I'm just naming it that. That's pretty basic. But I'm going to go ahead and build a rule here. So I'm going to create this rule set, rather. And as I create this rule set, and you can absolutely give it a description if you want to. That's good to describe a bit to yourself of what this is for. But when you create that rule set over here in the add rules step, you can begin telling this rule set, this collection of rules, what it's supposed to do for those that are affected by it. And so again, plus sign here to add a rule. You can add as many rules to a rule set as you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new rule to this. And when you're doing this, I recommend that you name it in a way that helps you understand whether you're logging or warning with a passphrase or trying to prevent something. And so in this case, let's just say for my organizational level rules, I'm just gonna log a bunch of things. So this is gonna be a log rule, and it's gonna be logging something like dimension type changes. I don't know, something like that. Or just log dimension types. You know, you could call it whatever you want, but be descriptive enough so you know what you're setting up inside of here. And so in my rule target here, and you can also describe a bit more about this if you want, okay? So if I go here to select something, I'm gonna select a command that I want to be watching. There's other types of things you can do here, and we're not gonna go super deep into this because another part of this series is talking in glorious detail about rule definitions and every aspect of rule definitions here. But if I go here into commands and into the criteria, you can choose here different types of things you can do, like the ability to create a certain type of an object, or create things like view templates from view, or deleting objects of different things, or there's all kinds of different controls here. In this case, the name of this particular rule was about modifying a type definition. And so if I go in here, and specifically I'm looking for dimension types. Now you could block the entire command if you wanted to, but what I'm looking for is dimensions, dimension types specifically. And so I can filter for that really quickly. I can add that to the list. Now you can technically add a whole ton of things into this list of commands that are being watched, but understand that everything that is in this list will have very specifically one message that associates to it. So what I like to do is make one rule with one command, or two, or maybe three commands at the most per message that I'm putting out there, so I can customize the message per the commands, and it makes it a little more granular as to what happened specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, so that criteria now has one thing that it's watching. I am logging changes to dimension types, so my criteria is specifically watching the command of modifying types specifically for dimension category. Now in here, because I'm just logging this, I don't have to do anything else. I can just create this rule. There is no messaging to the end user. It's just a bunch of logging of stuff. But I still personally like to make a rule per thing so that it lists better in my online default reporting. If you want to get real custom with customized reporting in Postman, or using Power BI, you can absolutely do that. The backend API, and we've talked about the API and other CTC webinars a number of times, all of this information is accessible, so you can absolutely build custom reporting, filter down to user teams, filter down to users, filter down to command types, warning types, you can do all kinds of stuff. I'm today, just again, we're talking introductions, and so we're just gonna be taking a look at the default reporting that is possible with this. So I'm not preventing anything, I'm not showing any message with this particular rule, I'm just building one for logging of dimensions. And that's what I would normally do in my organizational rule set. I would start with logging everything that I care about, logging all the things. You can build as many rules here as you want. And once you update this now, when somebody starts up Revit, opens a project, it's gonna have an organizational level rule set that says, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be logging dimension type changes, and then it'll do that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and update this. This will close it out. So I have an org-wide rule set that's doing nothing but logging right now of one thing. And I've got my user rule set for today's little webinar sample, and I'll show you some things that happen inside of here. So in my rules, let's take a look at something that specifically relates to the warning messages that can pop up. So let's do something like the warning and passphrase here that I set up for the exploding of CAD. In fact, let's start with the simpler one, warning of the import CAD. It was a very simple message. So in this message right now, this is a very simple text box. And right now in today's iteration, there isn't a lot of colorized formatting or image embedment. Right now, it's let's just get the messaging out there. And in the near future feature coming to Ally is this will have much better rich text formatting with things like colors and bold versus italic versus normal versus image embedments versus hyperlinking and all kinds of things, right? That's all coming. For right now, it's just a simple message. You can start along this line, and then pretty soon you'll actually have some pretty powerful additional formatting you can do. So don't wait to set up your rules though. Start with the logging, I would recommend. This one here, you'll notice that I'm showing a message very specifically. This is just presented when this rule is triggered. This little info kit's telling you that. So I'm just showing a message, that's it. This one doesn't have a passphrase. I'm not preventing anything. I'm just showing a message and that's it. So that's what this is set up to do. And again, this is the import CAD. So it's looking for any kind of import CAD command, and it's gonna show the message when that happens. And so I just put a little messaging in here. That little checkbox basically turns that on. So if you check that box, you should absolutely be putting some kind of a message here in this space, okay? My warning with a passphrase right here, slightly different. I did the prevent action option in addition to showing the message. And then when you do prevent action, if you want that action to be able to be bypassed, you must put some kind of a passphrase, like I put explode exclamation point. Now, if you want this to be a warning with a passphrase that is bypassable, then in your message, you should tell them what to type to continue. It's a very intentional thing. You're telling them what the passphrase is. They have to type that. And until they type that, it will not allow them to continue. So that is a prevention with an optional bypass here, just by simply putting a passphrase and informing the user of the passphrase. You also, of course, for certain things, for maybe your BIM managers, maybe you don't want to tell the end users what the passphrase is. You just want your BIM managers to know it. So then you just share that around with your BIM managers and they can go, oh, I have a passphrase. I can type that in and I can still bypass it, but you're not specifically telling the end user what that passphrase happens to be. So that is an option as well for some things that maybe BIM managers need to be able to do, but you absolutely don't want end users doing. The more extreme event in that case is a true prevention, like I have here with my in-place family. And in this case, I am preventing the action. I'm still showing a message. That was that very simple, this is not allowed on projects, but I didn't put a passphrase in. And when you do not put a passphrase when you're preventing, the only option the person has to do is, okay, I can't continue, and it just won't let them go. So this is for those truly harmful things that you really don't want to take place in your project. By the way, don't start here, guys. Those of you, gals, all of you on this call today, if you're going to be doing this in your organization, don't start with this. Don't be that guy who's like prevents everything and then your users throw mutiny and they find tricky ways to get around stuff. So don't do that. Start with just logging stuff, okay? But this is how you can begin to just set this up. You simply add rules to your rule set. Your rule set defines the scope of what's being affected by this, who's being affected by this, and then you add rules to that. Now, by the way, in the future, if you were like, oh, that was kind of silly of me to target a specific user, or maybe I wanted to target myself on purpose before I roll this out to the whole firm, and I want to just verify that these are doing what I expect them to do, fantastic, target yourself. And then later on, you can always say, okay, just kidding, target the organization. And then I would probably change this to organization level rules at that point, okay? So you can absolutely change the scope after the fact to change what's affected and who's affected. So that's a good way of doing some testing. Target yourself or the BIM managers first, let you kind of figure out what these rules are doing within that control space, and then roll it out to the entire organization or to a project collection. It's up to you. All right. So within the Ally settings, let's just talk through this again. One of the things that you want to do, I didn't actually mention this, is you want to make sure that Ally is actually turned on, okay? If you don't turn Ally on in the first place, you don't make sure that it's enabled, you're not actually doing anything with it. So here in standards, down in settings for the organization as a whole, you want to make sure that project standard tracking and logging, and for that matter, enforcement, is actually enabled. If you hit the switch, then it turns off and it's not doing anything at all. So you probably want that to be turned on if you're going to be attempting to implement these rules, save those settings, and then when people fire up Revit and when these rules are enabled and they're signed into anything CTC, then these rules will begin to take effect for them. So ensure Ally is enabled. We talked already about establishing rule sets, but you basically build up a rule set, you define the scope. Then within that, you create yourself some rules within each rule set, depending on what the scope is you're trying to affect. And I did mention a little bit about naming conventions. I recommend that you tell, in your rule, whether it's logging, whether it's warning with a prevention, or whether it's just straight up preventing. And then I always recommend you start by testing these rules on yourself so you can see the effect, you can make sure that it's getting the effect that you want it to have before you roll it out to your end users. One more time here, just in the standards for the logging purposes, you can, based on those rule names here, it tells you prevent in place family and that was enforced. It tells you that warning with a passphrase for the exploding of CAD was either enforced or bypassed. And in this case, I bypassed it because I put in the passphrase. And so you can tell just really simply right from here, because of the naming convention of the rule, you're able to tell what's going on. Warn against the importing of CAD, bypassed. Warn against the importing of CAD. This is when I hit cancel on that and it was enforced. Log that the text type was changed, that was bypassed. That's always going to say bypass when it's a log. Just tells you that it was triggered, basically. That's all it's going to really do. So this gives you some information to understand who the user is that's doing the thing. And again, there's a lot more information behind the scenes. If you really want to dig deep in more customized reporting, you could pair this up with some of your Ally data or your PAL data, because you know date and timestamps, you know what project they happen to be in at the time, what view even they happen to be in at the time. And a lot of this is much more easily viewed in customized reporting. But again, we're just talking about the starting points here. So let me give you a few recommendations that I think you'll find very meaningful. I've already stated some of these, but I want to make sure that it's very, very clear about how, if you're going to start doing this today, or when you start doing this today, because most of my BIM managers, when they start seeing this, are like, oh, I'm going to start this right away. And that's fantastic. I encourage you to do that. But you want to make sure you're following a good, clean implementation plan. Otherwise, like I said before, we find that users tend to mutiny if you go too hard, too fast. You're starting to be too kind of totalitarian, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So step one is just start with some light logging of commands that you're interested in. Log the things, even the ones that you really don't want to be done in your projects. Just log, see if it's happening and who's doing it, because that way you're better informed in the first place. So start with some light logging. If you're like, man, I really hate in-place families, great, log it. Make an organization rule and log the fact that in-place families are being done. You'll know who, and you can cross-reference that with PAL data to know what projects it's being done in, or you can start doing custom reporting like I mentioned. Because from those log details, you now, as the BIM manager, as the one trying to sort of, quote, enforce some of these best practices, you can start to develop yourself a very targeted user training program. So train those users. Maybe they don't know that it's a bad thing, right? And that's okay, but start gentle, right? Start with just like, hey, let's do a quick lunch and learn on some, use of in-place families. And then the whole goal of that, of course, is to teach people not to do it, or importing of CAD or exploding of CAD. And you teach them, like, this is not the right way. The better way is to go pull in these typical details if you can. Or if you're going to do this, do it in a non-actual, company project, explode it, fix it, and then copy that view across into your project, right? There's some workflows that can be done. So it's not always just stop a thing, but The goal here is to inform them of the best possible way of doing things, and you'll know if they're doing things not the best possible way because you're logging it. After you've done some of these lunch and learns and you've trained them on the right way to do some of this stuff, what I like to do is follow up the training with some command rules that have messaging that's now warning, right? Hey, remember in the lunch and learn, we talked about XYZ and you're doing XYZ, so we're logging this. You're informing them that you're logging it at that point with a pop-up, and now they have a choice. They have a choice to continue, or they have a choice to cancel and go do it the right way. And again, you're getting logged metrics about that. So then it's up to you to, of course, continue to monitor those logs and see who is now bypassing rules that are now set to be warnings, and who is stopping that sort of bad habit that we know our team members have probably built up over time, and maybe they've brought over from other companies. Now, after you've monitored this for a while, maybe you host a few more lunch and learns, that's up to you. But after a while, for things that are super critical, it's time to turn up that intensity a little bit with passphrases. Now, instead of just messaging, hey, this isn't the best practice, now, because they probably got numb to that and they just clicked, continue on the boxes from that point forward, that's great. Now you turn it up a little bit with passphrases and you tell them what they are potentially, depending on what it is. And you can say, hey, type this passphrase. Now they got to type passphrases, specific passphrases that lets them continue through the box. Now it's a little bit more inconvenient for them to do the thing you don't want them to do. And again, you continue to monitor logs. And again, you try to follow up with some training if it's relevant, if it can be done, if it's reasonable, maybe some teams-based lunch and learns, things like that. And then finally, for the super critical items, you begin to block access. And depending on how critical they are and like who the repeat offenders are and what types of projects, you can target those blocked types of things, maybe to specific projects, maybe to specific groups of people in your firm. Maybe you target everybody. Probably not, but you could. That's up to you, right? These are all fully customizable rules by you. Maybe if you have like one person in the firm who's doing the things continually and they're just not listening, well, then you target that one person. But you have full control here over exactly how intense this information is, or if it's just logging, and how you're going to leverage this information. See, Ally is just a tool. It's just a tool for you to be more informed and to help guide your users in the moment. But if you start, with the super high intensity right up front, well, you get some really clever users who begin to bypass it. But if you start light and you start training intentionally, very targeted all the way through, and you start cranking the intensity up over time, well, then users get more and more and more used to it, and they start to generally follow your workflows better and better and better. And then your projects just start running better. And when users aren't doing the things they shouldn't be doing, well, they don't see any messaging at all, right? So that's a pretty big benefit here. Now, I know we are just scratching the surface on Ally. And as we continue through this series into more, deeper and deeper topics, we're going to go deeper and deeper and talk more about additional strategies you can use. But the goal today was to get you a bit of an introduction on how you can start down the road of leveraging Ally on your projects to start being informed as a BIM manager. Just start informing yourself with some logging. Doesn't really cost much other than just a little bit of setting up a couple of rules for things you want to be informed on. So we're going to be continuing this series, of course, but for now, I think we're going to wrap up today. For those of you watching this as a recording, thank you. We hope you found this meaningful. We hope you were able to leverage this as you're setting up your Ally environment. And we hope to see you as this series continues. We also hope that you can subscribe to the CTC YouTube channel here so that you're able to continue getting notified when these series things go live.